Hi, welcome back. This is presentation 1 of chapter 6, which deals with public opinion. Here are the key topics. Again, I'm going to assume you guys can read. I'll give you a couple of seconds to look those over. And then here are the goals. Here's what you're expected to learn over the course of learning from this particular chapter. And let's jump in. So what government does. So in 1991, you had a mass shooting. And then you had another mass shooting a few years later in, 2018. And the two people had vastly different kind of reactions to those two events. One became a gun owner and a gun advocate. The other one became an advocate for gun control. Again, surveys tend to show that support for gun control tends to increase following mass shootings, but paradoxically, gun sales tend to rise in the aftermath of mass shootings. So you actually have people, you get multiple directions of a lot of different kinds of attitudes. Minorities of people basically say, oh, I love my guns, and if you're trying to take my guns away, I'm going to buy more guns. That's human nature is at once perfectly rational and perfectly perverse. So there you have it. So why it matters, again, in a democracy, government is expected to be responsive to the will of the people, but whose opinion is represented in public policy, particularly on issues like gun control. How influential is public opinion relative to other political forces? As we learned in our previous discussion of civil rights, social movements can exert influence, but so too can powerful and well-funded interest groups, as we will learn in a couple of weeks. Another important question is how well informed are people? What channels are available for them to make their voices heard? Over the next several presentations, we'll explore the research showing what public opinion can do to influence public policy, but political scientists and communication scholars disagree over the extent to which the public is adequately informed about politics, as well as whether elected officials represent the interests of all Americans or whether they are more responsive to the people that fund their elections. So public opinion is defined by basic values and beliefs. Public opinion consists of the attitudes of people collectively and the attitudes they hold on policy issues, political events, and elected officials. So there is an important distinction between values and beliefs and attitudes and opinions. And it's important to note that values are comprised of deeply rooted convictions and principles, while attitudes and opinions, which may have been formed either on considerable thought or based on very little thought, as such, when you think about it, values are generally resistant to change, while opinions are often far more malleable. Public opinion generally references a range of opinion, and when public opinion is measured on political issues, it often takes on binary shape. As an American, we're often asked whether we support or oppose abortion or the death penalty. And that imposes a certain structure on how we model beliefs that may not always be that accurate. Another important issue here is the idea of ideology, which forms a cohesive set of beliefs that forms a general philosophy about the role of government. So the media often use public opinion surveys to report political differences between Republicans and Democrats, rural and urban residents, blacks and whites, men and women, young and old, religious and devout versus secular Americans. So public opinion is defined by basic values and beliefs. Political values, again, American political culture is organized around a baseline commitment to liberty, equality, and democracy. And so to illustrate Americans' commitment to freedom of expression, polls indicate that 71% of Americans believe it's very important that people can say what they want without state or government censorship, compared to a global average of 56%. American political culture tends to place greater priority on personal liberty while minimizing governmental intrusion into individuals' private lives and property. Nearly 90% of Americans believe free and fair elections are essential to U.S. democracy, and Americans strongly support checks and balances and the right to protest. However, there is an increasing partisan divide over how those core values are interpreted. For example, less than half of Republicans believe a free press is very important to maintaining a strong democracy, whereas 76% of Democrats believe that. Support for freedom of speech, a free internet, and free press is stronger among Americans than most other countries. Americans' belief in equality of opportunity at the same time tolerates wide disparities of wealth, and that achievements should be based on the results of personal effort rather than and ability rather than on connections. But again, Americans still believe strongly in democracy and the rule of law. Political ideology. In the United States, the definitions of the two common political ideologies have changed over time. To some extent, contemporary American liberalism and conservatism offer mirror images of Americans' common commitment to personal autonomy. Liberalism emerged in the modern era, around the 16th century, as an ideology of the merchant class, and again, the arguments favoring private property and minimal restraint on trade. Social liberalism favors targeted economic interventions by government to ensure meaningful equality of opportunity while maximizing personal liberty. Conservatives generally in the United States generally oppose government interventions into the economy, but favor aggressive use of government to uphold family values. So this is a slide that kind of shows you American ideology. The fact that more than a third of Americans consider themselves moderate suggests something important about ideology. It doesn't really help us that much to understand people's attitudes, because a lot of moderates will be both. They'll have aspects of their lives where they are very liberal, and there will be aspects of their lives where they are deeply conservative. And when you look at it again, the fact that a quarter of Americans consider themselves liberals, around a third of Americans consider themselves to be conservative. Conservative is oftentimes the easier sell, right? Especially for people who are not deeply committed to any set of political values. Who are Americans? Who are conservatives? Again, this kind of shows you, in terms of gender and all these other kinds of demographic realities. Generally speaking, the further along you are with an education, the more likely you are to be, more liberal for a variety of reasons. In terms of generation, younger Americans are, a lot more prone to be liberal than has historically been the norm. Women are a bit, tend to be a bit more liberal. Certain ethnic groups tend to be a little bit more liberal. If you look at by party, obviously the Democratic Party is a much more liberal party than it was in the past, and Republicans are much more conservative than they were in the past. I love this slide because it really does give you a lot of a good idea of how different demographic realities affect the way people view things ideologically. Core values, again, this kind of measures the strength of support for propositions that reflect a strong democratic foundation. It's important that not at all, people who answer not at all to things like national, they support national elections that are open and fair, rights and freedoms for all people. Or, the fact that 3 to 4, and in some instances up to 10% of Americans are not at all on any of these categories, it reflects something important that's kind of demographically ubiquitous, and that is that some people are just nuts. There are a few people out there that absolutely are totalitarian in their attitudes. They don't care about anybody else's feelings. They don't care. I mean, they're very nearly sociopathic. They're perfectly happy with a strong lead, with a strong authoritarian dictator. And so for them, democracy is just completely valueless. And that's something that you find in just about every society. It's not like there's, that upwards of 10% of Americans believe that campaign contributions do not lead to greater political influence. That's just a bizarre, bizarre outcome to me. But in any event, so this is presentation one. I'm going to stop it here. When we get back, we will continue talking about public opinion and how it's measured and the challenges that are innate to effectively and accurately measuring public opinion.